Welcome to HOBI Conversations. I'm Steven Saunders. This podcast features the people leading our company and reshaping the ITAD industry in their own words. Real conversations about where the ITAD industry is headed, what it takes to lead in this space, and why doing this right matters more than ever. We're not here to narrate the industry, we're here to move it. If you're deep in this world, finding your footing, or just trying to understand where it's all headed, these conversations are for you. Let's get into it. How's it going, everybody? This is Steven with HOBI Conversations episode 4. Today I have Jason Radakovich, our VP of Sales. Just a little bit about Jason. Avid, Indiana sports fan now since the Bears moved. He's been doing this sore spot. He's been doing this for a really long time. Is kind of a Jedi master when it comes to this ITAD stuff, the reselling, the mobility, the whole thing. So we're super grateful to have him on. Jason, I'll let you take it away. Introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate the time and the courtesy and everyone's patience. Stephen and I were just talking. I'm celebrating my 33rd anniversary with HOBI and the industry. I've only worked for HOBI in this industry, so quite an accomplishment, one I'm very proud of. And, hopefully I have, a few good years left ahead of me and, pass the torch and whatever knowledge that's relevant along to all our up and comers.
So you're the old vet now. You know what I mean?
I'm the old guy. I used to be the young guy. I was originally in Steven's shoes, and thank goodness he's here to start filling those and bring some new ideas and technology to HOBI, so we appreciate that.
Yeah, we're excited. Well, you, after the holiday, are getting ready to head to the Mobile Disrupt Conference, a large conference. Yeah. Also, plug here, you can connect with Jason at the show, drop a comment down below, or we can connect you guys directly. Not many ITADs attend Mobile Disrupt, so walk us through why HOBI has a presence there and what you're most looking forward to at the show.
Yeah, just a little brief history about HOBI, and as I said, I've been here a long time, so I witnessed this progression firsthand as it was. But the mobile market hasn't been around forever. To some of you younger people, it has, but it was not there when I first started, and several years after, smartphones and true mobile phones were entered into the market, and then people started refreshing, mainly companies, and just like every product, there's a problem and a process to be solved. So HOBI was fortunate in a number of ways just to be the right company at the right time with the right people and expertise to solve that problem. Long story short, one of the top 3 mobile providers that are left was sending equipment to HOBI for recycling. Very little reuse, so we started processing that. And slowly over time, HOBI realized, hey, there's a market to resell, parts, hold units. There's a big demand around the world for these products, and HOBI went to the carrier and through some back and forth discussions. Initially, we were allowed to resell parts, no data-bearing devices. So the progression started there. One of HOBI's owners, Craig Boswell, and president, developed a method and a display of data erasure and verification several years after we started receiving product, and finally the carrier accepted our process and we started processing and reselling phones. So this was a big step, not only for us but for the carrier, and to kind of start this whole trade-in and resale market. And tablets followed as well several years later as they were introduced into the market, and both for parts, repair, recycling, things kind of started there and have been evolving ever since. So We have a long history in mobile, and kind of a roundabout answer. That's why we're at Mobile Disrupt. We were at the forefront of the industry, and want to continue. We try to strive to be the gold standard for everything we do, and if we're going to be in the mobile space, we want to also strive to be the gold standard there as well.
Yeah. You mentioned being just at the forefront of a lot of this mobility stuff, being on the front end of phones, which turns to tablets, which will continue to turn into different tech.
Yeah.
HOBI has this unique ability to handle all of this stuff just at a massive scale. We've got partners globally spread out everywhere. Talk through how HOBI processes are different and what any company would lose out on by not working with us.
Yeah, looking at scale, HOBI is at the height of our receiving, has received and processed anywhere from 80 to 100,000 in phones. So we were able to scale up and down. So I think both the size and the quickness we can do, that's very important, for partners and manufacturers. Not only did we start with a carrier, we simultaneously did work for a manufacturer as well. So our bar was set very high before there was an industry, before the associations that we all belong to and that these conferences sponsor. So it allowed HOBI to set our internal bar higher and also give vendors out there the confidence that they could use us and that our processes were both secure and verified. So, we just didn't do erasure by resetting. We have a advanced ERP system that is homegrown. HOBI's engineers have developed that over time, and it's naturally evolving. That's one of our competitive advantages. We own our technology, and this has allowed us to develop internally what we call is our advanced routing system, and that allows two things. It allows us to process our client's material according to the request of their contract, and it'll also to process these large volumes. So what the advanced routing does, it's a system of decision trees. We enter all the manufacturers, all the models, values, what's worth testing, what's worth parting out, what are the parts values. So there's just there's a finite amount of decision trees, but there's a lot of them, and it's constantly evaluating the terms of the contract and also the economics of what is the next step. So we don't want to spend time and labor on a phone or a part that does not have value. Sometimes a phone should just be dismantled and destroyed altogether. Sometimes only certain parts have value, and sometimes it's resold as it is, as long as data erasure can be performed and verified.
You said something about just processes. I want to sit there.
Mm-hmm.
Phones hold some of the densest personal and corporate data of any device. They're in everyone's pocket. Everybody has them. Walk us through how HOBI guarantees that device and that data is truly wiped. What standards do we hold ourselves to when sanitizing our phones?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, HOBI holds the highest certs in the industry. The standards are R2, RIOS, ISO. And like I said, we, set our sites and our standards at or above those certifications. Sometimes a vendor will have higher standards, and we're able to scale and revise according to those. So like I said, we have a homegrown internal process that we use to erase, verify, and re-verify, and this was developed, and the process was scaled to satisfy these carriers' needs, which were several steps above R2 and RIOS and some of these other current standards. So HOBI has always been a leader, even instances where we thought maybe there was a loophole, we would spend, time and effort to close that possible loop or area that data may be able to escape, even though it's at an extra cost, just to assure that erasure verification is completed and documented for the vendor.
Absolutely. HOBI was also one of the first ITAD companies to introduce mobile device repair and refurbishment. What capability does HOBI have regarding the phone repair, and what has HOBI done over the years to ensure that it is just top of the line, top tier, and it is as much of a value add as possible?
Yeah, when any good ITAD, everything isn't grade A, grade B, or first or second gen from current products. So, in order to maximize value for clients, sometimes the sum of the parts are greater than the unit as a whole, and sometimes it's the opposite. So sometimes you want to build up, sometimes you want to tear it down. So our advanced routing system, I'll go back to that again. It allows those decisions, to be made, in a mathematical and superior way to maximize value for companies that send phones to us, tablets as well now. And it just, allows us to, get down to the bare minimum and maximize value. From the repair standpoint, we do level 3 repair testing. I think you go back to our roots of, doing work for the carrier. We were able to sell parts first. So, it's a natural progression of, setting up test beds, testing parts, having the product, the processes. We have, a benefit of HOBI too is we have on-site software engineers and product engineers. So we can, do things on the fly in a short period to set up testing and levels of testing according to the advanced routing system that's in place.
Yeah. That's just all super important stuff. You said value recovery. That when I'm in my chair, that's what everybody's asking me. How much is it worth? How much am I getting back? So once the phone is wiped and graded, the next question just comes right to me is, okay, what is it worth?
Yeah.
How does HOBI maximize what our clients are getting back from retired mobile devices, and what happens to those phones when they leave our floor?
So with all our product, we use a multi-channel, multi-regional approach to sales. And like I said, we gauge, the parts of the unit versus the whole unit to see which brings more value. Is it can we make more tearing it apart and selling, certain parts to one channel, certain parts to the other, or is it better to, to keep the phones intact and, sell certain models to one region of the world and other models in manufacturers to other regions of the world? So we're constantly, checking and evaluating, the insurance channels, replacements, parts channels, rental channels, anyone that has demand for and can use, use tested working product, parts or whole unit.
So we just talked about just value. What hurts that? How do we maximize that value for our partners? Device locks are every ITAD's worst nightmare. How are device locks and asset management software is just hurting us from an operational standpoint? And what are companies losing on the value front when these locks just stall progress?
Yeah, mobile devices, laptops, any portable device nowadays is, claimed by some management software. And, a lot of it's for security purposes, a lot of it's for controls. Very good products. However, as you said, it doesn't always transition to an easy process to unenroll these for ITAD. So, HOBI and every other ITAD, we have this same issue of we start laying our product on the line and start plug them in to the network, start testing them, erasing, grabbing the information, and here we come. Every process is different, but we all come across that lock many times. So that, we come across that lock, and the first thing we do is we grab serial numbers for all those units, pull that list, set everything aside, go to our client, ask them to release that, which could be a day, it could be a week, it could be a month. The uncertainty too is another factor, because, we can't have load after load accumulating. And so eventually, say 24 hours, we don't get a response or locking confirmation. We have to wrap that up, put it on the shelf, jump to the next one. So it's kind of a snowballing effect.
Absolutely.
Until that's, either confirmed, no, we can't unlock these, no, we won't unlock them, or they just don't want to put the effort into it. And sometimes that's the case. The relationship's very important. Sometimes our point of contact doesn't have the authority or may not know who to, go to. That's another, issue and problem that we run into. And a lot of times, to be honest, this is maybe the fifth, sixth, or seventh thing, on the manager who runs the program's list of things to do. And yeah, he'll get to it, but like I said, is it tomorrow? Is it next week? Is it next month? So it's a waiting game. The real issue is the lack or the loss in value between a lock device and a lock device. You're going to lose 60, 70, maybe even 80% of the value, because with HOBI's process, we'll tear the unit down for parts, test everything that we can, but that board is going to be shredded. That's company information, CPI, and we do not allow that out of our shop. And if it can't be erased, we have a zero tolerance policy. Our company is, takes pride, and since inception, has always been, and it's in our culture. No device or part leaves our facility that's not erased. So clients that want our process and sign up for our process, they're going to lose a lot of value by not unlocking these devices and letting them be resold for maximum. Our owners, that kind of jumps into probably the biggest challenge our industry faces right now is the right to repair. This is an industry problem with the manufacturers out there that have the solution to turn this problem on or off. Both of HOBI's owners are on, boards and committees, and are active in legislation and lobbies to have a happy medium between the manufacturers and the ITADs and the processors to get, unenroll these devices once ownership is transferred to the ITAD company. It would just make all our lives a lot easier. It would, take this burden off the, company that's using the ITAD. And just a lot of time is wasted. We want to go green, and this is a green industry, and this does not help that initiative by repeating things and wasting resources. So, hopefully in the near future, this will happen, and there'll be a clear, clean process to get this done. But currently, until that happens, this is a methodical, step-by-step, laborious task. That we all have to wade through currently.
Yeah, I mean, everywhere I go, every other ITAD I talk to is facing the same thing and trying to just prepare for it now and in the future. So we've covered a lot in our podcast so far. My last question for you will be, a lot has happened. You've seen a lot in the industry over the course of your illustrious career in the ITAD space. What do you feel like is the biggest change that you've seen, and where do you see the mobility standpoint heading from here?
Well, we kind of touched on the right to repair and getting some legislation to address those challenges that we're currently facing, and to get a consensus from manufacturers, the ITAD processors, and the end user of those devices to develop a process, whether it's a portal or some centralization organization that can kind of manage independently, the list that we create, and having access to the manufacturer serial numbers, and having an iron tight process, to facilitate the unlocking of these devices. So that's kind of a near-term, immediate issue and challenge. The next thing is just new technology developing. We're getting more and more wearables, watches, glasses, just everything you can think of. Automobiles are connected now, appliances. We have all these things that are now connected, and becoming more and more portable or movable, that have data, personal information, corporate information, and personal devices, and there's just a lot of overlapping and sharing that's not necessarily by design. So I think, sorting that out, and, just making sure there's awareness of, these aren't just sent to the scrapper. There has to be, some technical work done, and data eradication before, these are scrapped out. Just going back to the old mainframes in the 70s and 80s, it's a similar thing. There's not really a process. We know about it, that there's an issue, but nothing has been done, or there's not a process for that. So, getting ahead of things like that. AI is definitely, in the data center part of, the technology world. Where is that going to be, and lead to more of the mobile devices, and things that we're not even aware of, that
Right.
we're gonna be surprised of devices and technology. We don't, we'll just but if industry collaboration, and companies, like HOBI, and many others, to be honest, that we all tackle these problems together, and stay strong as an industry.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time. Again, if anybody is attending the Mobile Disrupt Show, please connect with Jason while you're there. Everybody be safe, have a great time, and thank you for tuning in.
And Stephen, there is an app, so if you're attending the show, you can also just ping me in the app, and we can connect that way as well.
Beautiful. Sounds great. Thanks so much for your time, Jason. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alrighty.